First Samuel chapter 18 really presents us with two options of the person we can be. And what I really find interesting here in First Samuel 18 is the idea of legacy. And are we willing to give up of ourselves in order to prepare the next generation, or maybe even someone who's of the same generation as us, but may have a really bright future? And it's difficult because you may want the accolades, you may want some kind of glory, you may want to be known for something, but is it better to be known for your kindness and generosity, or is it better to be known for your position? And that's what you're going to find with Saul and Jonathan here in this passage. Now, I encourage you to start back in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 55. He says, "As soon as Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, 'Abner, whose son is this youth?' And Abner said, 'As your soul lives, O king, I do not know.' And the king said, 'Inquire whose son the boy is.' And as soon as David returned from the striking down of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, 'Whose son are you, young man?' And David answered, 'I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite.' And as soon as he finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house." Okay, so right there you can see the beginnings of jealousy, and you can see the beginnings of love. It says that Jonathan loved him as himself, but Saul had this kind of mindset that if something was great, then he was going to keep it for himself. And he's going to become suspicious of David after the words of others, which is something that happens every single day in our world, or rather in our day. We hear things about people, or maybe people are really excited about someone else's accomplishments, and then we may be sitting there thinking, what about me? Whether it's in your relationships, or your marriage relationships, or within your family, these things happen, and unfortunately we can see the end of those things with Saul. Saul was a very jealous man. If you go back and you follow the story of Saul, he was kind of put into the place of leadership as far as being made king. He was reluctant, but once he was made king, he started out by, talking to God and seeking God's approval. But after a while, he just made decisions for himself, and he didn't go to God first. And so now he's just frantically holding on to his position. I'll go ahead and read down a little bit further. In verse 6 it says, "As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated, 'Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s.'" Now, is that true? Not necessarily, but because of the greatness of David's accomplishment, when Saul was even unwilling to go out, could Saul have taken this as, I need to step up, I need to be a better person, I need to lead from the front rather than sitting back in my chair and letting other people go for me? And it kind of goes into that idea of, what do generals do? What do kings do? Do they send out other people to die, or are they willing to go themselves? And we see David start to fall into that later on in his life when it comes to sending Bathsheba's husband out. He's back at home, but it was the time when, wars were fought. So you see a different approach to David and preparing him. I'll go ahead and read what it says about Jonathan, and then I'll leave you all with these questions. Let's see. Back in verse 3, it says, "Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants." Okay, so you can see the difference there between Jonathan and Saul. Saul wants to keep him back. He'll send him out to fight as long as he comes back. You're not going back home, but you can come back here. But Jonathan says, I'm going to strip myself of everything that is a symbol of my own power, and I'm going to place it on you so that you can be successful. Okay, so I'm going to leave you all with these questions and discuss them however long it takes. Is not really the point. I saw a post on Facebook this morning saying something to the effect of, God isn't concerned with us getting in and out of the building in an hour. He's never said, guys, I'd really like for you all to get out of here. We have other things to do. God is not concerned with that. So enjoy your time together. Enjoy your fellowship. Talk about these questions, and hopefully this is something that will stick with us as we prepare the next generation, or even those who are amongst our own generation. So God bless, and I will talk to you all later.